Hi, welcome to Give Me the Bible, where God's Word speaks for itself. And continuing to talk about Acts and Paul's missionary journeys and how it really fits with the rest of the Bible, I want us to talk about the jealousy of the Jews that Paul the Apostle encountered on his missionary journeys. And this is just so key to understanding not only the book of Acts and Paul's journeys, but also many of the things that Paul writes in later letters that we talked about in that last video about Paul writing letters to churches and to individuals. He's going to talk a lot about this issue between the Jews and the Gentiles. And really it all starts in Acts 13, where we see the animosity of the Jews really pick up here, because in Acts 13, Paul again begins his first missionary journey, and he travels all the way to Pisidian Antioch, and he gives this incredible sermon, and the whole city gathers, including Gentiles, and the Jews get jealous about this. Look in verse 45 of Acts 13. But when the Jews saw the crowds, they were filled with jealousy and began contradicting the things spoken by Paul and were blaspheming. And if you drop down a little further, it says in verse 50, but the Jews incited the devout women of prominence and the leading men of the city and instigated a persecution against Paul and Barnabas and drove them out of their districts. Now remember, they're doing this because the Jews thought there was no possible way that Gentiles could be a part of the kingdom that the Old Testament prophesied was coming. There was just no way that a Gentile could be saved, could be redeemed, and be a part of this incredible kingdom of peace that they were looking forward to as a Jewish nation, unless perhaps they were circumcised and became Jewish and submitted themselves to live like a Jew under the law of Moses. Well, that's not what Paul was preaching. Paul wasn't saying, okay, Gentiles, y'all can be saved if you become Jewish first, if you are circumcised and keep the law. No, he was just saying you can be saved by your faith in Jesus Christ, and that really was separate and apart from keeping the law of Moses and being circumcised, and that just infuriated these Jews. And I just want you to see that they chase him from city to city. So Paul leaves there, Antioch of Pisidia, and he goes into Iconium in Acts 14, chapter 14, verse 1. In Iconium they entered the synagogue of the Jews and spoke in a manner that a large number of people believed, both of Jews and of Greeks. But the Jews who disbelieved stirred up the minds of the Gentiles and embittered them against the brethren. Later in the chapter, the Jews follow him to another city, and it says in verse 19, the Jews came from Antioch and Iconium, and having won over the crowds, they stoned Paul and dragged him out of the city, supposing him to be dead. Okay, they're just following him, trying to kill Paul. They hate that he's preaching salvation to Gentiles. And in Acts 15, you have this very important situation where there was a false teaching that arose that Jews were saying, unless you become Jewish, submit to circumcision and the law, you can't be saved. You can see that in verse 1. Acts 15, verse 1, some men came down from Judea and began teaching the brethren, unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. And the apostles had to straighten that out and tell them that's not right. Even in Acts 17, later on, his second missionary journey, he's in Thessalonica, but it says in verse 5 of Acts 17, verse 5, but the Jews, becoming jealous and taking along some wicked men from the marketplace, formed a mob and set the city in an uproar, and attacking the house of Jason, they were seeking to bring them out to the people. Acts 18, Paul's in Corinth. The Jews, in verse 12, drag him before the judgment seat of Gallio, who was the proconsul at that time, the Roman proconsul, and he didn't really care about the fact that the Jews didn't like Paul. That was not his concern at all. And so Paul was kind of released by Gallio. But ultimately this culminates in Acts 21, where the Jews in Acts 21 are in Jerusalem, the holy city of God. To the Jews, that was really the city of God, and Paul is there. And so they say in verse 27, when the 7 days were almost over, the Jews from Asia, upon seeing him in the temple, began to stir up all the crowd and laid hands on him. And they start to accuse him falsely of speaking against the law of Moses, of speaking against the temple. And so Paul ends up getting arrested. And for the rest of the book of Acts, he's in jail, really, awaiting trial. He appeals to the emperor the emperor of Rome to hear his case, and it's just so drawn out for a period of 4 years. Paul is sitting in prison, all because these Jews had him arrested on false charges. And that is why that situation is so key to understanding, because it's just so reoccurring all throughout Acts and even in his letters that he writes. I hope that's clear, and I'll see you next time.